And it's taken me 5 years to get to this point where I can even talk about it through therapy, friends, fabulous friends, but solely, ultimately, through Jesus Christ is the only reason why I sit here.
In our podcast, Hearing the Unheard, Stories of Transformation, we discuss a variety of sensitive subjects such as suicide, suicidal ideation, self-harm, abuse, and faith crisis. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to our podcast, Hearing the Unheard, Stories of Transformation, presented by Pause Wellness. I'm your host, Eric Stauffer. I'm very pleased to welcome our guest today, Tracy Munson. Hi, Tracy. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for letting me be here.
Why don't we start just telling us a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and give us a little story about Tracy.
Perfect. Well, I actually am from India. So I was adopted when I was 13 months old by a family in Logan, Utah. And they adopted myself and my brother at the same time. So they had fallen in love with some kids that they had seen somewhere, and they were older and they had their own children, but my dad just wanted to have these little kids that were from India. So they were in their 50s when they adopted us. But I grew up here in River Heights in Utah, in Cache Valley. And my brother and I mean, we grew up here with a lot of different people, and I've grown up in this community for a really long time and really gotten to know the people in this community.
So you were 13?
13 months old.
Oh, 13 months old. I'm sorry. I totally missed that.
Yes, 13 months
old.
old.
And how old was your brother at the time?
He was 2 when they adopted us. And interesting, they were going to get us together, but when they went to the airport to pick us both up, he wasn't there. And so they ended up having another father that was adopting kids too. It was through an LDS agency. He went to India and actually had to get the boys and bring them back. And it was in August that they received me, but actually he didn't get back with the boys until December.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were just over 1 year old. You probably don't have any recollection of anything before that.
Not a lot, but I will tell you, growing up, it was really interesting because we were definitely different in this community. And my family was a well-known family and people knew them, but, we were definitely stood out from everybody. And from being little, that was definitely something that both of us felt.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. So predominantly white, Northern Utah, Latter-day Saint community. Mm-hmm. What was that like being from India, looking different than everyone else?
I think back to myself when I really started noticing, and I was actually talking to my kids about this the other day. It started at church, and I remember that it was kids, it was never adults at church, but thinking that we were bad because our skin was different, and so we would have to go back home and have conversations. And my mom was great. She was like, I am your mom, like these kids are going to know who you are and that you're ours. And she also, though, didn't understand what it was like to actually feel that way and go through it. So my mom was very empathetic in the sense of being there for us, but she didn't understand the experience, but she watched it happen. And I think that hurt her.
Yeah. Yeah. Parents, they can offer empathy as far as their own experience, but she wouldn't know.
Right.
She wouldn't know what it's like to actually be you in that situation.
Right. She wanted to try to be, but
because of the goodness of.
And I think both my brother and I, we kind of handled it differently. We always had friends in a different friend group, but there was always something about knowing that you were different. Or, for me, myself, like if I were to move through into when I really started, getting in my head, so to speak, it would probably be when I was in middle school. Mm-hmm. I really felt like I had to do different things to stand out or be somebody I wasn't. I was worried about other people liking me and fitting in instead of really being true to who I was.
So tell us about how you felt like that actually impacted you emotionally. What did it do for you socially? And then as you look back on it, the development of those emotions, whether it was healthy or unhealthy.
Well, a couple of things happened. So when I was in sixth grade, my parents got a divorce, and my dad had kind of always been like he was my dad and my hero. And I really always, I don't know when it started, but I kind of had a complex of, like, I would say a Cinderella complex, where I kind of wanted a Prince Charming to come save me. And I always felt like I had to be somebody I wasn't. And so we moved after my parents divorced to St. George. And that is when I really noticed, like, okay, like, who are you trying to impress, and what are you trying to be? And it really wasn't for anybody but other people, where I really started in my head, like, about, my appearance and my skin color, and if I fit in with this people, or, if I said the right things. And so it really started probably when I was about 13 years old.
So then it's almost like you felt like you had to perform rather than just be your authentic self in order to fit in. Am I understanding that right?
Yes. I feel like I never really understood my authentic self because I was trying to fit in. Although along the way, I met many people that allowed me to be authentic. And that is what I'm truly thankful for. And I truly believe that that's part of why I've continually been able to rise, is because I've had people show me by their example and allow me to be authentic to myself. So, but that came a little bit later.
Yeah. Remind me when we get to that, because I want to ask about what that looks like.
Okay.
Because I think the more we can understand what that looks like for allowing people to be their authentic selves,
Yes.
that'll speak so much to them.
Yes.
That's great.
Absolutely.
We'll come to that for
Okay.
sure. Okay, so you're in your middle school ages. How does this impact your life when you start wrestling with those ideals?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that was really a struggle for me, where I really started, this is where I think my mental health started, I would say, if you were to use that word, is I would go places with my friends, and, we would talk about different people, but they would say things like, just around me, it would be like a few of us, and they'd say things to me such as, like, our parents would never let us date somebody of a different color. And, I would just sit there like, how do you think that makes me feel? Like, I'm your friend. Like, how do you think that makes me feel? And so it kind of started then. And then I started really becoming, I would say, disaligned with who I really am. I always knew that I had a place spiritual wise, and I was raised LDS, and I really wanted to have this connection with God always. I knew that it was there. Like, it was always an underlying thing, but I feel like I was turned away for so long, and didn't really know what to do, and was looking externally to find that, which is kind of what really led me to my whole life of poor decisions. So
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So yeah, if you had this sense of a relationship with God and wanting that, but you were also facing like cultural assumptions that people are making that are directly impacting you and the way that they're seeing you, and if you're already basing your value on what others think of you, and then they make expressions like that, your self-worth, what does that do to your self-worth?
It's not great. And I will tell you one thing, and I will forever remember this. And I am so excited that I get this opportunity to say this, because I graduated from seminary, and I will never forget this. I was a junior in high school, and he was our seminary teacher. He was amazing. Everyone loved him. I loved him so much. I remember he gave me a picture that was of Jesus kneeling that said, "I never said it would be easy. I only said it would be worth." I still have it. But he was giving a lesson on Cain and Abel, and he was talking about all these different things about color. And he was talking about in the 60s how, I believe it was President David O. McKay, there was somebody that had heard about the church and the gospel in like Africa, and they had sent, a letter and wanted to be a part. But at that time, they were not allowing Black people to have the priesthood. And, he was explaining this was part of his lesson. But after, he could tell that I was bothered. And so he pulled me aside, and he was like, I don't know why this is like this, but I want to find out, Tracy. And I'm so sorry that you felt this way. And kind of that was the beginning of me really not knowing where I belonged with God, because I had always been raised in this church. and I knew that he was there, but then I'm like, oh wait, am I not accepted? Like it was very confusing. And then, going through different relationships with different people. I've had several different relationships. I ended up marrying an African-American guy that, I really felt similar to, in the sense that he understood me because of his race. But also, again, leading back to the save, I needed someone to save me kind of complex, and not being authentic to myself. It did a lot of damage in who I chose for myself. It didn't align.
You wanted to be seen the way that you felt you were, which you weren't getting from the community experience. So you marry someone also a minority. And so can I ask how long how long were you married to him?
I was married 21 years.
21
so
years.
It wasn't just a short marriage. It was a very long marriage. We have 3 beautiful kids. I'm so thankful for them. They've taught me everything in life. I mean, everything. So I'm so grateful for that. But it was a long relationship.
Did you find in the early stages of that relationship that it was helpful that you could see eye to eye on understanding what it's like to be a minority?
I really did. It was definitely something that when we first got together, I really connected to. But I'll tell you an experience too. I'm so grateful I have this opportunity, because I really felt alone. And I had an opportunity with him when we first were dating to go to California and meet with some of his friends. And they, all of them were Black people that had been raised in LA. Some of them had come to Utah State. I'd met them before, but I'd never been like in this kind of community and down to this place. And we went down there, and I remember that one of his friends said something to me like, "You don't know your Ebonics." And I was like, what is Ebonics? Like, what does that mean? And just because, I was raised here in Cache Valley, my parents are white, and it was not something I thought about until then. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how are people perceiving me? So, I'm not Black enough for Black people. I'm not white enough for white people. I don't know a lot of Indians because there's not a lot here. So I didn't know who I was. But I felt like more comfortable with him because he understood some of those things, but still there was still kind of a disalignment that way.
So even in those efforts in a marriage where you thought that could give you more of that understanding for yourself, it wasn't full. It didn't achieve that.
No.
What you had hoped.
No.
So as you continued to search for this like understanding of yourself and your background and who you are, how did that and miss after miss after miss on those efforts, how did that impact your mental health?
It not good, because I didn't. And again, like I want to reiterate this because it's something that I really think a lot of people do. I continually kept seeking outside of myself and other people, other things. We had lived in California, and I got introduced to a great church, wonderful church, like truly felt God's presence there. I mean, knew like this was a great place. Had, all these different ideas about this church, went to that church for 5 years, made a lot of great friends, learned a lot of great things, but also learned how a lot of people that are parts of religion have, an expectation of you as one of, their parishioners. They want you to be a certain way or act a certain way. And the human things that I think naturally happen and occur, instead of being able to express them, I think you feel shame with them. So it becomes harder and harder to be, I feel like, who Jesus really knows all of us to be.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all sinners.
Yeah. That is the difficult thing about church and religion, right? Is that there's this ideal and there's these doctrines or principles that are meant to bring hope and love and light to all. But there's a sociology that we experience as we interact as humans in all of our flawedness. And it takes on different forms in any religion, in any circumstance. And it's so hard for us to differentiate what the gospel is intended to be and what is it not intended to be, and what is a reflection of what. Does that make sense?
Exactly. I mean, I feel like I think it's basically a translation of however we take it. And so I think sometimes that's what gets in the way. But I'm really grateful because I always knew I had, again, like this really great relationship with God. And my whole life, I've always just had this an affinity towards Jesus. I knew that there was something about him. There was something with he and I. It was very special. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't realize, this is so interesting. So until probably in about 2015, I just decided one day to start journaling my prayers. And so I just would journal my prayers every day. I started doing it once a day. Then I started doing it twice a day. And I have 5 years of journaled prayers.
Wow.
And it's so interesting because during this time frame, and now that I reflect back and go and I can look back at some of the things I asked for and prayed for, it's so interesting because I had lost both of my parents. And one of my things specifically with my mother was that I helped our family stay together. It was so important for her that we knew that we were a family and that we were together. And my brother was adopted, that was a year older than me. And she just really wanted us to always be a family. And so through these prayer journals, I realized I really was like really trying to pray for my family. But, going through all these different things, I really got to know God in a different way because I waited. So I'd pray and then I'd wait. And it was really crazy because I would pray and write these things down. And then I'd write down like what he did to answer that prayer. And it was so amazing and inspiring because the first book that I have, I think I wrote the first entry, and it was the next day that I had something that he'd done for me. And so I started recognizing all the times that he showed up for me and constantly honored him, and knew that there was just something important about him. And in 2018, my life kind of got blown apart in the sense where I knew something was going on in my marriage. My ex-husband was an alcoholic. There was a lot of problems within our house. The kids and I talked about it a lot, but I always thought I kind of knew him. And again, I thought we kind of aligned on that spiritual level, like on a different level. So I thought that we were always aligned. I knew there was something off, but I never thought it would be something that would blow my world. I literally think I was broken for like 3 days until I went to be with my brother in St. George, where he was like, you got to get yourself together. You've got 3 kids. Like, what are we going to do? Like, we got to work this out. And, he just, whatever it was I wanted to do, he was on my side. And so I decided I'm just going to go back and I'm going to just wait on God. And I'm just going to have God like guide me through what to do, and didn't know what to do. Honestly, like I really didn't know what to do because I didn't know how to handle any of these conversations. I didn't know how to ask. I didn't even know what to do. My husband and I were living in separate rooms. Nobody knew what was going on in our household. It was humiliating, but ended up really like, getting to know myself and understanding myself a little bit better. But during this time, I didn't realize that my own brother, who was my adopted brother, that was the only one of my family that was there for me, that he was personally struggling with his own things. And that same year, he ended up taking his own life. And just like talk about mental health, like, and really just not knowing what to do. I did not know what to do. And I just laid it all on the ground for God and just said, like, what do you need me to do? Because he'd just been telling me, like, be still, Tracy, be still. And I had for a really long time. And I'm so grateful that I like understood for him to really guide me on the be still, because it allowed for me to really sit with everything and honor who I am in things. And it's taken me 5 years to get to this point where I can even talk about it through therapy, friends, fabulous friends, but solely, ultimately through Jesus Christ is the only reason why I sit here. The only reason. He carried me through the last 5 years. I can't even tell you. And when my brother died, he allowed me to get to know him on a deeper level. And I'm grateful, because right before my brother killed himself, I thought I was going to kill myself.
So you were in that same mentality.
Exactly. So I didn't know what to do. And when he did that, the first call that I got after my oldest brother actually called me to tell me that Travis had taken his life, because I guess he was the contact and it was in St. George. And so the police had gotten to his house. So he called me, and I just was, I mean, I didn't even know what to say. I couldn't believe it. I still don't believe it. But the next morning, the very first call that I got was from my nephew, Travis's son, and his two boys. He had two sons, and I knew right in that moment when I was talking to one of his sons that like this, absolutely, this was not the way to go. And I had to like be there for everybody else and really get myself together, and understood that was the beginning of understanding the ramifications of what that does to other people. Yeah. So, I mean, that's taken years. That has taken truly only Heavenly Father helping me understand the why.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't think I could get through that acceptance. And I don't think a lot of my family ever could, because that's just something that I feel like I've been able to lean into because of things. I mean, I was in the dark for so long that I just grabbed onto any kind of light that I could get.
Just hearing this, you think about the human experience, and you just wonder, how can someone go through that level of trauma back to back? And you mentioned, I have two questions, and the first is, what did it mean? What did being still look like when you felt like the Lord was telling you to be still? And then the second question is that Christ is the one who carried you through. So my second question is how did he show up? Like, what does that look like? So let's start with the be still one.
Okay. The be still was really, because at that time too, I was really earnestly seeking and like really searching. And so I was constantly like, I would pray and then write out my prayers, and then I would like ask for a scripture to be given to me, and it would show up and be right on time. It was, I mean, just synced, everything was synced. And so with the be still, it was more like, just sit and wait for me. And still there are times like, and mostly for me, I'll tell you, it's probably be quiet is what really it is. So it's like, be quiet, and I mean, I feel like too, that's been something that's been challenging for me as I'm opening my voice up a little, is going through all these things. And growing up, my family always thought I was like a big mouth and like to talk about things and tried to create problems. And so, I don't want to be that person. I never want to be that person. I always felt like I always just wanted to stand up for what was right or what felt right to me. And I always would get kind of pushed down when I would do that. And so I didn't do that after a while. But, after going through all this and seeing when Jesus really showed up for me, like, I mean, gosh, for example, when he really, I mean, so many things, but one great example I'll give you is on my brother's funeral. My family had a really hard time and didn't think that he should, like, I don't know. I think I didn't know if they didn't really want to have a funeral. They did, but they didn't want anybody to say anything. I felt like maybe I heard one of them say something to the effect of, he did this to himself, so he doesn't get this, like whatever the celebration was. I don't know, whatever, so to speak, the funeral. But I didn't believe that. Yeah. And one night I had been just really like, oh my goodness, just not knowing what to do and feeling like really challenged about honoring him, my brother. And just God woke me up in the middle of the night, and I went outside and I just prayed and prayed, and he just wrote down and had me full of ideas to do. And the next day I did it. I made sure that he was honored the way for his beautiful bright light was. He was a beautiful soul that touched so many people, and so many people were heartbroken. And he was somebody that everybody that knew him would never have thought he would have done this. In fact, I feel like at the time my family couldn't accept that. I mean, going back to mental health, my family was a family that didn't really like to talk about stuff like that. And really emotions were frowned upon too. So that was something that was never talked about. And then if people did talk about it, it was kind of like they were looked down on, if they were on antidepressants or going to a therapist, which I'm sorry, but those are things I think for me that have saved my life. So I just feel like it's hard when you're around people that aren't willing to look at how they can, help themselves.
It's amazing because you talked about how your brother, although he was going through that, was there for you when you went through that experience with your husband. And then he takes his life, and the hesitation because of lack of understanding or the stigma on mental health and suicide was there shouldn't be honor.
Yeah.
That there was a shame that was shrouding over the whole thing.
Yes.
And then you go to God and he just downloads.
Yes, he did.
He helps you see who he is.
And not only that, oh my gosh, this is an even beautiful story, a testimony to God too, is my brother had a girlfriend that he had met in school at Utah State, and we've all stayed friends, and she happened to come down after we all found out that he'd passed away, and we were there, and it was like maybe a day later she came to me, and she is somebody that really, I would say, doesn't believe in God, like never really had kind of a feeling, so to speak, and she has always been just a really sense of logic in everything, really great. But she came up to me and she said, I need to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? And she goes, you know me, I'm not like, I've known her for 20 years. She's like, I don't like believe in God and all that stuff. But she goes, Travis told me to tell you something. And she goes, he wants you to know that it is okay. However people decide to honor him, that he knows that you honor him and that it is okay. And like, she sat there and was like, I can't believe I'm telling you this. Like, I don't believe this stuff, and I just thought, thank you so much, because I needed to hear that, and it's just, there's little stories like that. I could go into big stories that have changed my life, really, truly, that have changed my life of what God has done and shown up for me. From beautiful friends that he's blessed me with that I know are not just friends here on this earth, to people that I meet daily that I get to encounter that remind me of my worth or me of theirs.
Yeah.
Isn't
it so sad? Maybe not sad, but also beautiful that it takes these depths of pain to see the love and the beauty that is in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, my whole life, I continuously looked outside trying to find, Heavenly Father, Jesus, God, whatever you want to call it for yourself. And until I had to water my own garden with the tears of like the dark night of my soul, I didn't know what he could do or how he could bloom me and how he could actually really be willing to give me the life that we wanted for myself.
That's beautiful. So tell me, what has that done? Like now, as you look at yourself and how you feel about yourself, what have you learned?
Wow. Well, one thing I've learned is to take a look at my thoughts, of what's going on with my thoughts. And so especially when I wake up, like what is my first thought? And then when I start thinking negative things, I read a book. Actually, books really helped me. I saw a lot of different things, but one book I read told me to look at myself from the outside of my head. So listen to my voice on the outside. And so I started doing that and really hearing the way I was talking to myself. I'm like, wow, you are sucking. Like you are not doing a great job.
Yeah.
You got to talk better to yourself. And so I'd start catching myself and saying better things. And then really energetically truly responding to the energy around me and seeing how I influenced or how it influenced me and how, really truly that everything that's within us can be shared. And it is, we all share everything with everybody all the time. And so just really being able to relate to people and having people know that like they're not alone. One of the reasons I really want to do this is I just don't want anybody to ever think that there's not a glorious bright side at the other side, because it is so dark, and it has made me who I am. And I am so grateful. And people have asked me, like, if you were to find out everything that you did, would you do it again? And I'm always like, yeah, I would, because I would be living a completely unauthentic life.
Yeah.
And now I get to see what God really has for me. All along, he had something, but I wasn't paying attention because I wasn't paying attention to myself and like what I needed, and what I needed to bloom and who I truly am.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so beautiful. You are, it's like there's this, there's a difference between confidentiality and hiding, right? There's confidentiality that I think we need at certain times to respect a situation, to allow for privacy to happen. And then there's this moment where we go, this needs to be shared because this information can help someone.
Yes. I mean, and truly, for years, and honestly, I'll be honest, if my kids, they knew I was here, I don't know how they'd feel, because this has been a shameful thing in our family, but it has affected each of us to such a degree. And I don't think we should shrivel ourselves down for the damage that somebody else has chosen to do, but that is their lot to carry. Like, we can move forward and heal ourselves the best way we can. And by the way, we still 100% unconditionally love and honor the fact that this person is a part of our life and always will. Like that's part of what God teaches us as well. But also with like the boundaries of knowing what we want for our lives.
Yeah.
But, I hope that other people though will know, like, you don't have to hide in shame, especially when things, I know this sounds terrible, but when things happen to you that you really didn't have a choice in, that you really are experiencing the ramifications of other people's choices that now you have to sit with and put back together. I feel like it's hard. It's shameful.
Yeah.
I felt shame for years.
Yeah.
I have not wanted to say things for years. I mean, people don't know that there are millions of people probably that have no idea. They probably don't even know we're divorced because
Right.
I don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm at the point in my life where I want to do right by who I am. And if I can help somebody else and just talk about it and make somebody else feel safe, that's all I want to do.
Yeah, that is a healthy way of looking at differentiation in our relationships, right? Is knowing where my agency begins and ends, and knowing how by what I can choose for myself, how it might help other people.
Exactly.
And sometimes when we have those thoughts of shame or embarrassment, it prevents us from being able to help.
I wish people would understand truly that shame is something that like they shouldn't be even looking at. Like, vulnerability is something that I have to say is just frowned upon. And I would just tell everybody, I mean, the more vulnerable people are with me, I feel so just connected even deeper.
Drawn to them.
Yeah. And I just feel like, because that is a really scary thing to do,
Yeah.
to really be vulnerable and like to put yourself out there, like that this has happened, but in a positive way too. Like, I never want to be a victim. And I feel like I lived in like the victim status for a while. And sometimes I fall back into the like, this happened to me, but I know that's not who God made me to be.
Yeah.
He did not make me to be that way. He made me to be like somebody that helps other people come to him.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to do.
Well, this interview is like the perfect case study of what you just said, right? I didn't know your story. I didn't know any of these details. And all I feel is drawn with compassion for this pain that you've been through, this beautiful light that you've discovered in your life, and now this like courageous, awesome choice to then share that with people to give hope to others. I can't thank you enough for being willing to do that.
It's a little scary. I mean, like I said, I really want people to know though that they're not alone, and you just never know what's going on with somebody. Like, be kind to people. You do not know what is going on with them.
Yeah.
Give people grace. That's one thing too I've learned, is just grace, grace, grace.
Yeah.
Right?
Give grace. People need space.
Yeah.
They need hope.
It's been given to you.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
You've given some great tools and tips to us. I look back on that journaling of your prayers, this documentation of your spiritual yearnings, and then documentation of how you saw God respond in your life. I'm sure that had some therapeutic effect in you.
One thing, if I like talk to people, my kids hate me because I'm always like, have you thought of one thing to be grateful for today? But it really is true. Like, when you start like really stopping and just, what are you grateful for? I mean, really, what are you grateful for? Because it just becomes a huge list. And then you really do see all the things that you should be really seeing that he's doing actively for you in your life every single day.
Yeah.
But I mean, I finally feel like I'm here on this earth to live. I didn't even have I don't even, I mean, I don't know if I had a purpose or what I thought my life was going to be, but now I'm just excited to live. Like I try to stay present in the moment. I try to listen to people and hear them. I'm just excited to live.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
As you look back on, kind of the concept of what this podcast is about, smashing the stigma by sharing our story, how do you hope that this will help someone? If you were to summarize that.
It's interesting because the more I bring up mental health and how much it matters to me, it's just all these people just come out, and it's like they are just as engaged and for who I am and what I want to do in my journey on this earth and in this community. I just want people to be empowered with tools to be able to know that they can get through things and that there are things out there for them. There are like-minded people. There is light. And so I really, with this, want people to know, like, you just don't know what's going on with somebody. And so really, truly, like, allow yourself to be vulnerable in situations because you never know what will come out of it.
Oh, Tracy, thank you so much. Cannot thank you enough for coming on this podcast and sharing this story. And
thank you.
And I just know that you'll help people and you'll help them see the hope that is available to them.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you still like me even with my snotty nose.
Oh, no, you're so great. That's great. Well, there's been a lot of tears on these, so it's no worries at all.
Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure
and
an honor again.
Thank you for your courage.
I really look forward to what Pause Wellness does for everybody. I mean, I am 1000% behind this. I mean, I am grounded in what your root cause is for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, this will help us so much. So
Good.
Thank you
I
so
hope
much,
so.
Tracy.
Good.
Appreciate it. You bet. What a great discussion we just had with Tracy. She is a light and an example of perseverance, being able to document such traumatic experiences and then seeing how her faith and different tools and tips and resources orchestrated together to provide a new life for her in many ways. And I'm just very thankful that she was able to help us see how that happened. And we hope that that provides the same hope for all of you or those that you love.